know you've written this manifesto about what you call your new Anatolian cuisine. You talk about having a fresh perspective on traditional products, and I wonder how that fresh perspective relates to the ways that you choose olive oil and use olive oil in your restaurants.
When I talk about fresh perspective in the new Anatolian kitchen, it's not necessarily about the fresh flavors. It's more about the approach, the mindset, how to approach food, because the region where we live, it has millennia, hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years of history and tradition when it comes to food, especially. So we tend to get squeezed in a bit, which is normal. You know, how very much like in Italy or in France, people cook their parents' food, or the mothers, the fathers, the grandfather, grandmother's food, and it's very, very similar here as well. So that's why when we say fresh perspective, has a lot to do with that. But also, if we connect it to olive oil somehow, it is a more contemporary approach, a fresher approach in flavor as well. When you talk about Turkish food or Anatolian food, a lot of times people, they kind of connect it to Middle Eastern food a lot. But Turkey is huge. I mean, there's an enormous area, especially on the west side, the west coast, the whole Aegean area. It's abundant of fruits, vegetables, olives, nuts, seafood. It's an amazing. It's like a gift from above, more or less, as a region. It has a very fresh approach in food in general. So I'm very much influenced by that area, especially when it comes to creating dishes.
Do you think you use olive oil in any ways that are different from a traditional Turkish chef?
We use olive oils in a lot of different ways. If is it different than other Turkish chefs or the more traditional ones? That I don't know. It's very hard to say, because both myself and also colleagues, more the younger generations and also the old school ones, we all use a lot of olive oils. And it's not just, oh, we just have one olive oil in the kitchen. I'm looking at my kitchen now over there. I got I think it's like 6 or 7 different bottles on the counter that I'm constantly using. And the same goes for the kitchen. When in our commercial kitchens, also in our large kitchens, it's not just one olive oil or something for pouring and something for cooking. We all use that. So I don't think that I do something that's that different. Maybe I'm searching for a new olive oil each year. I know that a lot of people, because of the huge amounts that are produced and a lot of varieties. I mean, both in southeastern Turkey and even in the Black Sea region, there are olive oils, but especially in the Aegean region, most of us have friends or family that have a few trees that are squeezed, that are pressed in the neighborhood, let's say, olive oil press, and we get it home. But what we try to do every year, which I think is a bit different, is we do a tasting. Very much like when you do a wine list, you taste the vintages. You just don't buy the vintages because last year was good. You want to taste it before you do anything. We do the same thing with olive oil. So especially there's so many different varieties and different ways of pressing your olive oil. It's not just extra virgin or early harvest. Is it using traditional stones that is pressed and let it flow naturally? Or you use cold water to extract it? How is it done? And when is it picked? Or what region is it from? Is it high up in the mountains, or is it close, lower by the sea? So there's a lot of things that play a role. And of course, now with climate changing so drastically each year and in each season, I think that olive oil is one of those products that's really affected by it, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad. So we try to do a huge tasting as a team and see almost like a blind tasting, and just put points on it, what we like, what we don't like, and then we pick our olive oils accordingly.
Great answer. Would you talk about some of those 6 or 7 oils that you have in your kitchen? What styles you have, and how you choose which one to use for which type of dish?
I tend to use a lot of olive oils, both at home and in the restaurant. And the way we use them, it's, of course, we all have our little favorites, but it all depends on what we cook, or if we use them without cooking them, without heating them at all, or what type of vegetable or vegetable we're using them on. Let's say if it's a super ripe tomato, I might want something that has a bit more kick to it. But if it's the super fresh, almost like a springy cucumber that's very fragrant, I want something that's a bit lighter. So that is the flavor profile, and it all depends on what region is we get it from. I have some that are super early harvest, almost like a pre-green, not even early harvest, even before that. That's picked, immediately pressed at the property in the field where they're picking it, in the olive grove. And then some that I really enjoy, but that I wouldn't really cook with it. It would almost be sacrilegious to heat that thing. It's so pure, it's so beautiful. It's something that I almost just want to take a spoon or almost drink straight out of the bottle, just for the flavor of it. I have to add that I'm very used to consuming, eating or using olive oil. So what some people may think is too pungent or too bitter, I love it. It's the same thing with wine. I mean, in the beginning, when you get into the wine, you go with the lighter ones in the beginning, and then you move on to a little bit more fuller and I would say present wines. I would say same thing for olive oil. A very traditional dish that we cook both at home and in the restaurant is called zeytinyağlı, which means with olive oil. That's the name of the whole category. And I remember doing actually a demo at CIA a couple of years back, and because you can do it in huge amounts as well, so you can actually cook for students bulk and super healthy and good, and it's all vegetables and it's cooked with olive oil. So it's a vegetable, you can use all different types. I love artichokes, that's my favorite in this type, and especially now it's super in season right now. So we just slowly braise it with olive oil, and that, so there's no liquid, nothing, just slowly braised artichokes in olive oil. For that one, I wouldn't use that's very pungent or very bitter olive oil. I would go somewhere that's a bit milder. But I'm not using olive oil as a, let's say, lubricant or to deep fry anything. I don't deep fry a lot, so I use it for the flavor of it. I use it because I like it, not just to, oh, I need to mix into a vinaigrette or something like that. I mean, I like to pour it straight on, so I can get the flavor of it. It's like you wouldn't do a cocktail with wine. Hopefully, if it's a good wine, especially, you wouldn't mix up a cocktail. So I'm a bit purist in that sense. I'm trying a lot of different things, but I want to taste a good olive oil, and we are blessed with the abundance of varieties, of regions, of just having so much of it, and so not much in quantity necessarily, but much in variety. So that's maybe why I'm so a bit conservative, I would say.
I know a lot of people are hesitant to try those pungent oils, or they think they don't like those really pungent, bitter, aggressive oils. What can chefs do to make those oils more acceptable, more desirable to their diners?
A lot of diners, even in high-end restaurants or in more, let's say, widespread restaurant, they could be a bit hesitant about jumping onto a very present, I would say present. I mean, we use bitterness, and very often bitterness is used as a negative, whereas it's great. It all depends on what context you think about. But the pungency, the bitterness, the fruitiness, everybody's after fruit. But what about the bitterness and the pungency? Without those two, an olive oil would be quite empty and flat in a way. It may not be easy if you're not used to it. So, like with anything that's new, that's what we have done in the past, and I would recommend to fellow chefs or restaurateurs as well, is to go easy. You go bit by bit. You don't have to throw everybody into the deep sea immediately. Just go nice and easy. Just walk in there. If it's too cold, then go in slower. I mean, and I think the same with olive oil. You could do maybe a tasting, or like starting with the lighter one. After they try that, then do another one. After they try that, do another one, and just step by step, you move on. I find myself comparing it. I don't know why. I usually don't do that by comparing to wine for some reason tonight. But it is same thing there. When you start with the wine, maybe you wouldn't go for the funkiest natural wine in the beginning of your wine travel or wine tasting. Same thing with spices. If you approach it as almost as a spice, almost as a flavoring agent, let's say, for the flavor of it. I know people talk a lot about the health issue or the health benefits, which are enormous, of course. It's like liquid health, but if you think of it as a spice, the way you wouldn't just use one type of chili flake in your kitchen. You use a lot, and in the US especially, I know there's zillions of different chilies. They all have a different character and a different flavor. And it didn't happen overnight that people got used to this much. It's with people coming and cooking, Latin American food coming into the US, amazing restaurants and flavors. And by doing that, people got used to it. I think it just needs some time.
Terrific. Yeah, I think the wine analogy is a very good one because chefs spend so much time thinking about their wine list, taking pride in their wine list, and they don't think in that same way about olive oil. Would you talk a little bit about seafood and whether you see a rapport between certain seafood dishes and a certain style of olive oil?
Seafood and olive oils, I mean, they are very, especially where we live, it's in the same area, right? We have seafood, we have the sea there, beautiful Aegean, and then continues into the Mediterranean. It's amazing. It's like paradise on earth. And then if you're in the sea and you look up the hill, very often you see olive trees. So they really go hand in hand. But what type of fish or what type of seafood with what type of olive oil, or what, when I say type, I very often refer to the flavor profile of it. When I talk about the lighter one, it can have a bit less bitterness, maybe, or it's all a game of balance. The whole thing, cooking in general, it's that balance. Sometimes you want something that hits you in your, like right in your face, and then kind of mellows out, or you start mellow, then you go up, and it's a bit like music even. But if it's a fish that's spanking fresh and you just slice it up and eat it raw, then you may want something that's not as forceful. Or if it's simply grilled or something, then maybe not as strong. But if you go with something that's been cured, or if you go with something that's been dried or salted, something like that, or smoked even, then yes, of course, you need something that has more power to it. For example, there is something that's called a variety along the Aegean coast that's called erkence, and which means early, because it's early, it ripens early. That one has a very beautiful fruity flavor, and somehow nature has gotten that balance. So the olives or the olive oils from that variety very often works with the seafood from that region. I think that throughout years, it's just been perfected over time, and the people that lived there hundreds of years ago and thousands of years ago, they maybe have learned how to use that together with the fish that's from that region. So I guess that's the answer to it, because they really work well. Or if you go north, let's say to the northern part of the Aegean, it's a bit colder, it takes a bit longer, and it's not as present. It's a little bit more delicate, the olive oil there, as well as the food. So they kind of work well there as well.
What about seasonal influence? Are you influenced at all by whether it's spring or fall in terms of, or cold weather or hot weather in terms of the type of oil that you choose to cook with?
When using an olive oil or cooking or choosing, let's say, an olive oil, seasonality, like with everything in cooking, I think affects a lot. In the spring, we want to get out of the winter. We want to like open up, all of us, like both us as humans and also everything in the soil. It just comes out. It's fresh, it's springy, it's amazing. And then the olive oil, very often what happens is because it's pressed later on in the year, so we have quite a fresh olive oil in the spring when we start, and it can be a bit raw, it can be a bit rough around the edges, maybe hasn't rested enough, but I tend to want something that's a bit fresher, that's a bit has a bit more fruit, not as much bitterness, maybe, yes, of course, a bit like pungency that I like, the peppery tastes I like. But if you move on to the winter, when you're like really, you want to stew, you want to eat like a little bit more richer, and I don't want to say heavier in a way, but richer food, then I would probably use a bit an olive oil that I really like. It's picked from. We always talk about early harvest olive oils or the green oils, etc. But if you use an olive oil that's allowed to ripen, almost over ripen on the tree, and then press that, that fullness in flavor is amazing later on in the darker months, let's say. It really works well. It's almost like, hey, instead of using butter, you can actually use that. And it works really well that way. It's not easy to find, but if you're lucky enough to kind of have your connections, then you can get that.
Can you give an example of a particular dish where that style of oil, the later harvest oil, really makes the dish work?
The fully matured olives, or the olive oil that comes from the fully matured olives, they have a very rich taste. It's like it's there, it's present, it's like right in your face. So something that a lot of people would connect to butter, or like more buttery dishes as mashed potatoes, let's say, or even let's go with something that's not Turkish. Let's go with a bœuf bourguignon, for example, super traditional French dish. A dish that is so rich, that has the wine there, that has the stock of it, like a rich full stock there, and like, let's say, beef cheek bourguignon or something like that. A bit, not when I'm cooking it, because it's just too long of a cooking it would just mess it up. But at the end of it, especially when I plate it, a drizzle of that super late harvest olive oil, it just switch it over to another dimension. If I would put something that's super fresh in that dish, just to drizzle a bit of olive oil without thinking about what I'm drizzling on it, just like take it off the shelf, the extra virgin olive oil that I have in my kitchen, it wouldn't add anything to it. It would just add more fat or grease or oil or whatever to the dish. But if you use the right one, which I think in this case is the very late harvest olive oils, it just works. It just works perfect.
I know, fine olive oil can be really expensive especially in the quantities that a restaurant goes through. Can you talk about how to maximize the impact of the money that you spend on olive oil? How do you get the most for your expense?
Olive oil is considered a bit expensive, or it's a lot of people may think it's expensive. I think it changes, of course, from country to country. If you're an olive oil producing country, it's not going to be as expensive as some other countries, etc. But using a good olive oil and a little of it, rather than just an average something with no flavor, I would say would be step number one to make it go longer. Use a bit, but a lot, because that little one, it's just the flavor is just there. The nose is there, the flavor is there, the depth, everything that you feel in the back of your mouth, everything is there and present. So you don't need a lot of it. I do go through a lot, but maybe you don't need that much. But rather than just opening up a big, I don't know what, like a gallon of olive oil and just pouring it in, that I very often compare to as using a lubricant. It's like engine oil almost. Like, why would you even do that? So start with using the best possible oil you can. And very often I say that I'm not rich enough to use bad oil, or I'm not rich enough to eat bad food because it will make me sick. So when you think about it in that sense as well, if you're really super stingy, you could spray it on, but that takes away the whole, don't use it in every single dish, but when you use it properly. There are other fats or other flavoring, let's say, agents out there as well. But of course, for us, because of where we are, I think, we're a bit spoiled. So I'm a bit caught off guard when it comes to the economics of it, because it's for us, it's not really something that we dig into. It is expensive in Turkey as well, if you compare to, let's say, the average income. But I go through a lot at home, and that's maybe 50, 60 liters for one per person. And when I multiply it by the amount it costs, we get so much of the junk in the kitchen anyway, so it's not even, I wouldn't say that cost should be an issue when you're talking about, because cost is not an issue when you pick the best fish. Cost is not an issue when you want the better marbled meat. Cost is not very often an issue when you talk about a wine list, a vintage, or so why should it be when you pick your olive oil, which is one of the core, one of the center of a good kitchen.
Well, you talked about sitting down with your team and tasting through a bunch of olive oils. Apart from that, range of mild or early harvest to late harvest, what other flavor characteristics are you looking for when you select an oil?
when selecting an oil, when we select olive oils with the team, of course, we go through the traditional: is it fruity, is it bitter, is it pungent, etc., or is it green, or is it like the green fruitiness? Is it mild? Is it intense, etc., etc.? We go through all of those, but and that's fairly easy. It's like math. It's like 1 0 0. It's like computer science. It's like zeros and ones and zeros and ones. It's just ticking off the boxes. But something that's harder to define, which that's usually where we get stuck or where we're having a nice argument, is, do we like it? And there's no right or wrong answer for that. But I think that's the most important part. It can be super fruit. It can be amazingly pungent and very nicely, beautifully bitter. But does it do it for me? What does it do for my own? Do you get a connection? Do you get a click in your brain? I might think it's great. My colleague might not like it at all, and that's fine. And then we sit down and talk about it, and then we do another tasting, and we do another tasting. Usually we just kind of like eliminate what we don't like, and keep, let's say, the 21st ones, and then we go over and over and over and again. And that much oil can get tough on your palate, so it usually takes a couple of days. And that's always like this kind of little ritual that you go through and say, okay, this year we picked this. So that's very often, rather than bringing out like the specific characteristics, saying, oh, it has to have this, it's very often, do we like it? And there's no right or wrong. There's no yes or no for that. Something that we do take into consideration is who makes it. We work with a lot of small producers, and some of them depend on our business for their production. So sometimes, even if it's not our number one pick, if it's a producer that we've been working with for the past 15 years and it's a great product, yeah, we put that on the list as well, because it has a lot to do. They've been nurturing their trees through generations, and we're working with them. And without them, we wouldn't be able to get any of the beautiful products. So it's not just the flavor when we pick the olive oil. We don't buy from a mass huge producer. We buy usually from the smaller ones, and we have very, very intense relationships. So that's a big, I would say that's a big decision factor in our making decision for us as well.
I just have one final question, and that is to imagine that you're having some friends over for dinner. They're all vegetarian. You're making a meal with multiple courses or multiple dishes. Can you talk about what you might make that would show a range of different olive oil types?
At home, not in the restaurant. I'm going to start with that. Then, and they're all vegetarians or vegans, which would fit perfect. I'm not a vegetarian or vegan, but I probably eat more plants than anything else. So it wouldn't be too tough. I'd probably go. I would construct my menu in a very easy way. I would start with probably a zeytinyağlı, which is the olive oil braised vegetable dish, depending on what's in season. So let's say we would do today beautiful artichokes around. I'll probably have slowly braised it, and that's served room temperature. It's not chilled. Once we chill it, it kind of loses it. So we cook it, we leave it out or leave it covered out, and then we would start with that. We cook it with olive oil, which is not super strong, but at the end of it, I drizzle with a little bit. So I use 2 different olive oils when making. So I cook it with something else, and then I top it off with something that has a bit more freshness and fruitiness to it. So that I would do. I would always have some sort of green leaves, or right now the tomatoes are not that good. We still need surprisingly, they're not bad for this time of the year, but they're not like super, super ripe. But if they would have been ripe, I would probably just use them arugula, large leaf arugula that I shred really finely, and then just grate tomatoes on top of it. That way I don't need any other acid. All I need on top of that is some salt and olive oil. But for that one, I would need a strong olive oil that's that could, let's say, work with the arugula, which is super pungent in itself, and then tomato, which is just the umami all over the place. So I would do something like that. And as a hot dish, probably even aubergine, like a smoked aubergine that I grill on live coals or something, just the whole thing. Instead, people, when you eat that, you don't need a steak or anything like that. You just eat that thing, and maybe a tahini dressing where I would actually mix like a little bit of tahini with lemon juice, and then some good olive oil on that. For that one, I would really need a strong olive oil because it's so present in flavor, especially when you grill it on. Just throw the aubergines over the hot coals, and just peel it and eat it as it is. It's so present and strong in flavor. So I would really use something that's really powerful, almost like a late harvest. We talked about winter dishes, but this one is so strong and present. So maybe I would use a late harvest olive oil for that one. And dessert, I don't know, just simple fruit without olive oil.